She Children's Classics. A classic children's story, specially selected by the editors of She magazine.
The Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Once on a dark winter's day, when the yellow fog hung so thick in the streets of London that the lamps were lighted and the shop windows blazed with gas as they did at night, an odd-looking little girl, with her father, was driven slowly through the thoroughfares. Sara Crew was only 7, but the strange old-fashioned thoughtfulness in her eyes and the expression on her beautiful face would have looked old even for a child of 12. The fact was, she was remembering the voyage she had just made from India with her father, Captain Crew, and thinking how strange it was to come from the bright warmth of the blazing Indian sun into the dark chill of these strange streets. Her mother had died when Sara was born, and her young, handsome, rich father was her only relation. They were fond of each other, and she was always told that she would be very rich when she grew up. But she didn't understand all that being rich meant. She had always lived in a beautiful bungalow, had many servants waiting on her, any toys or pets she wanted, and an ayah who worshipped her. And she had her own way in everything. Only one thing in her short life had worried her. The climate in India was very bad for children, and she knew that one day she would have to go to England to school and live there for many years. The place, as she always called it. And now, here she was on her way to the place. Her father kissed her as the cab rolled into a big, dull square and stopped at a big, dull brick house with a shiny brass plate on the door on which was engraved, Miss Minchin, Select Seminary for Young Ladies.
Here we are then, Sara. My name is Captain Crew.
Oh, yes. Miss Minchin told me to show you into the drawing room. This way, sir, miss. Miss Minchin will be with you in a moment, sir.
Everything here is so ugly, Papa. Ugly and heavy and... Well, I don't like it, Papa. But then I dare say soldiers don't really like going into battle.
Oh, little Sara. What shall I do when I have no one to say solemn things to me?
But why do solemn things make you laugh so?
Because you're such fun when you say them. Sara, let me kiss you, my dear. I do love you so. Come and give Papa a hug.
Captain Crew?
Oh, yes. You must be Miss Minchin.
I am she, yes. And this must be Sara Crew.
Yes, this is my daughter, Sara.
It will be a great privilege to have charge of such a beautiful and promising child, Captain Crew. A mutual friend has told me of her unusual cleverness. A clever child is a great treasure in an establishment like mine.
Your main difficulty will be to keep her from learning too fast and too much. She's always reading books, Miss Minchin. She gobbles them up. History, biography, the poets, all grown-up books. Drag her away if she reads too much. Make her ride in the Row or go out and buy a new doll.
Papa, if I went out and bought a new doll every few days, I should have more than I could be fond of. Emily will be my intimate friend.
And who is Emily?
She is my doll. I haven't got yet. Papa is taking me out to buy her. She will be my friend. I want to talk to her when Papa has gone.
What an original child. What a darling little creature she is.
Yes, she is a darling little creature. Take great care of her for me, won't you, Miss Minchin?
Oh, yes, Captain Crew. You can rely on that.
Sara stayed with her father at his hotel until he sailed away to India. He rashly bought Sara anything he or she admired, and between them collected a wardrobe much too grand for a child of 7. Velvet dresses trimmed with costly fur, lace, hats with ostrich feathers, ermine coats and muffs, tiny gloves, handkerchiefs and silk stockings in abundant numbers. The shopkeepers thought she must at least be a foreign princess, perhaps the daughter of an Indian Raja. And at last Sara found Emily. She had seen her in a shop window and knew immediately that the large golden-haired doll with clear grey-blue eyes and real eyelashes was the one she desired. So Emily was bought and taken to an outfitter's shop and measured for a wardrobe as grand as Sara's own. That night, Captain Crew went into Sara's room and stood looking down at her, fast asleep, with Emily in her arms, her black hair mingling with Emily's gold. He sighed sadly, knowing how much he was going to miss his daughter. The next day, he took her to Miss Minchin's and left her there, explaining to Miss Minchin that his affairs would be in the hands of solicitors, Barrow and Skipworth, who would pay all bills for Sara's expenses, and Sara should be given any pleasure she should ask for. Then Sara and her father kissed as if they would never let each other go. When the cab drove away from the door, Sara went to her room, locked herself in, and sat with Emily, looking at the empty square. The next morning, Mariette, the French maid her father had engaged to look after her, dressed her. When Sara entered the schoolroom, everybody looked at her, and there was a lot of whispering before Miss Minchin arrived.
I heard Miss Minchin say to Miss Amelia that her clothes were ridiculous for a child. You can see the lace on her petticoats from here.
And she's got silk stockings on. And I never saw such little feet.
That's the way her slippers are made, to look small. I don't think she's at all pretty, and she's got strange eyes.
She's not as pretty as some, but she makes you want to look at her again. Her eyelashes are so long, and her eyes almost green.
I don't like her. Shh! Here comes Miss Minchin.
Good morning, young ladies. I wish to introduce you to your new companion. I shall expect you to be very agreeable to Miss Crew. She has just come to us from India. As soon as lessons are over, you must make each other's acquaintance. Now, Sara, come here to me.
Yes, Miss Minchin.
As your papa has engaged a French maid for you, I conclude he wishes you to make a special study of the French language.
I think, Miss Minchin, he engaged her because he thought I would like her.
I am afraid you have been a very spoilt little girl, and imagine things are done just because you like them, Sara. My impression is that your father wishes you to learn French.
I've never really learned French, but I...
That's enough. If you've not learned, you must begin at once. The French master, Monsieur Dufarge, is due at any moment. Take this book and look at it till he arrives. And stop looking so cross, just because you do not like the idea of learning French.
I like French, but...
You must not say but when you are told to do things. Now go to your desk. And here is Monsieur Dufarge. Now, good morning, monsieur.
Bonjour, madame. I believe there is a new pupil for me.
Yes. Her papa, Captain Crew, is anxious she should begin the French language, but it seems she does not wish to learn it.
I am sorry about that. Mademoiselle Crew, perhaps when we study together, I might persuade you that it is a charming tongue.
Yes, monsieur, but...
Stop saying but, Sara.
Very well. Monsieur Dufarge, ce n'est pas que je ne veuille pas apprendre la langue. J'ai essayé d'expliquer à madame que ma mère était française. Mon père me parle en français depuis ma petite enfance. Je n'ai pas vraiment appris la langue, mais vous comprenez, monsieur. Je parle régulièrement français chez nous.
Assez, mademoiselle. I understand. Miss Minchin, there is not much I can teach your new pupil. She has not learned French. She is part French. Her accent is excellent.
Sara, you should have told me.
I tried to, Miss Minchin. I tried. I suppose I did not begin right.
Silence, young ladies. Silence at once. And you, Miss Minchin, remove your elbows and take that ribbon out of your mouth and sit up at once. You really are a fat, stupid girl. Ask her a question, monsieur.
Well, I...
Now, Monsieur Dufarge.
What is French for the good bread, Miss Minchin?
I forget.
Oh, come along, girl. Tell her, Monsieur Dufarge.
Le bon pain.
Well, say it, girl, say it.
Le bon pain.
By now, Miss Minchin was red in the face, and as the lesson progressed, the girls either giggled at her or looked at her with disdain, much to Sarah's anger. When the lesson was over, she looked for Miss Minchin and found her sitting disconsolately on a window seat.
What's your name?
Me?
Yes. What's your name?
Ermengarde St. John.
Mine is Sara Crew. Yours is a pretty name.
Do you like it really? I like yours. You can speak French, can't you?
Only because I've spoken it all my life. You could if you'd always heard it.
I couldn't. I can't do anything. My father can do everything and expects me to be the same. But I'm not. He says I'm stupid and tells Miss Minchin I must be made to learn. But I can't. And I'm always in disgrace. I'm always crying and unhappy. But you are clever, aren't you?
I don't know. Would you like to see Emily?
Who is Emily?
Come up to my room and see.
Is it true you have a playroom all to yourself?
Yes. Papa ordered it, because I like to make up stories and tell them to myself, and I don't like people to hear me.
You make up stories?
Yes. Anyone can make up things. Now, shh. We'll open the door quietly, and we might catch Emily. Now. Oh, she's got back to her seat before we could see her. Dolls always do. You know, they're as quick as lightning.
Can she walk then?
Yes. Well, I believe she can. I believe dolls can do all sorts of things when there are no people watching them. At least, I pretend I believe, and that makes it seem as if it were true. Have you never pretended things?
No. Tell me about it.
Come and sit down and I'll tell you. Do you want to hold Emily?
Oh, may I? She is so beautiful.
Ermengarde, do you love your father more than anything else in the whole world?
I scarcely see him. He's always in the library reading things.
I love mine more than all the world, and now he has gone away, and it gives me pain. If I go on talking to you and pretending, I shall bear it better. I shan't forget, but bear it better.
Sarah?
Yes?
Lavinia and Jessie are best friends. I wish we could be best friends. Would you have me for yours? I know I'm fat and stupid, but, oh, I do like you so.
I'm glad of that. Yes, we will be friends. And I tell you what, I'll help you with your French lessons. Oh, there's the lunch bell. Come on, Ermengarde.
If Sarah had been a different kind of child, the life she led at Miss Minchin's Select Seminary for the next 10 years would not have been at all good for her. Although privately Miss Minchin disliked her, she knew quite well that if Sarah wrote to her papa that she was unhappy, he would remove her at once. Accordingly, Sarah was indulged and flattered and continually praised both by Miss Minchin and Miss Minchin's fat, dumpy sister, Miss Amelia. But despite all this, Sarah was never grand and shared her privileges and belongings with a free hand. The only girl that really disliked her was Lavinia, who, being inordinately jealous of her, was always spiteful about her too. But the younger ones adored her, and little Lottie Lee worshipped her. Lottie was only 4, and had been sent to school by a flighty young papa who did not know what else to do with her. Her young mother had died, and the child had been spoilt since the first hour of her life. She was an appalling little creature. In some mysterious way, she had learned that a very small, motherless child should be pitied, and used this knowledge to get her own way. The first time Sara took her in charge was one morning when she passed a sitting room where Miss Minchin and Miss Amelia were trying to suppress Lottie's angry wailing.
What are you crying about, girl?
I haven't got any, Mama.
Oh, Lottie, do stop, darling. Oh, don't cry. Please don't.
I haven't got any, Mama.
Quiet! You ought to be whipped. You shall be whipped, you naughty child, you. I'll go and get a stick or something. Oh, Sara, it's you, my dear.
Good morning, Miss Minchin. I stopped because I could hear Lottie, and I thought perhaps, just perhaps, I could make her be quiet. May I try, Miss Minchin?
If you can. You are a clever child. But you are clever at everything, my dear. I dare say you can manage her. Go in.
Thank you, Miss Minchin.
If you don't stop, Lottie, I will shake you. Please, my poor little angel. There. Oh, you wicked, bad, detestable child. I will smack you. I will.
I haven't got him, Mama.
Miss Amelia, Miss Minchin says that I may try to make her stop. May I?
Oh, do you think you can?
I don't know whether I can, but I will try.
Oh, thank you, Sara.
If you will steal out of the room, I will stay with her.
Oh, Sara, we've never had such a dreadful child. I don't know if we can keep her, but I will leave you with her.
What are you crying for?
I haven't got him, Mama.
Neither have I.
Where is she?
She went to heaven, but I'm sure that she comes out sometimes to see me, though I don't see her. So does yours. Perhaps they can see us now. Perhaps they are both in this room.
What's heaven like?
Well, perhaps there are fields and fields of lilies, and when the soft wind blows over them, it wafts the scent of them into the air. And children run about in the lily field and laugh and make little wreaths. And no one is ever tired. And the people lean over walls of pearls and gold and look down to earth and smile.
I want to go there. I haven't any Mama in this school.
I will be your mamma. We will play that you are my little girl, and Emily shall be your sister.
Shall she? Really, Sara?
Yes. Now let us go and tell her. Then I will wash your face and brush your hair.
All right, Sara. Let us go now.
And from that time, Sara was an adopted mother. The greatest gift that Sara possessed was her power of making up and telling stories. And over the next 2 years, this gained her many followers, but also the envy of Lavinia and certain other girls. Sara could not only tell stories, but adored telling them. One foggy winter's afternoon, she was sitting surrounded by a group of listeners in the corner of the schoolroom, telling a wonderful story about a princess who lived in a shining cave under the sea, when she noticed a dingy, smudgy-faced, forlorn little figure enter the room carrying a coal box much too big for her. The little drudge knelt down by the fire to replenish it and sweep up the ashes, and was evidently afraid to look at the children or even seem to be listening. But Sara could see she was deeply interested at what was going on, so she raised her voice so that she could be heard more easily. The small drudge, then falling under the spell of the story, sat down upon her heels and let the brush hang idly in her fingers.
The mermaid swam softly in the crystal green water and dragged after them a fishing net woven with deep-sea pearls. The princess sat on the white rock and watched them, then, after a moment, followed them into a winding grotto glowing with soft clear blue light and paved with pure golden sands. Strange sea flowers and grasses waved about her, and...
What was that? It's that girl. She dropped the hearth brush. She's been listening.
I knew she was listening. Now you've made the poor girl run out like a frightened rabbit. And why shouldn't she listen?
Well, I don't know whether your mamma would like you to tell stories to servant girls, but I know my mamma wouldn't like me to do it.
I don't believe my mamma would mind in the least. She knows stories for everyone.
I thought your mamma was dead. How can she know things?
Sarah's mother knows everything. So does my mamma. Sarah's my mamma here at Mrs. Minchin's. My other one knows everything. And where she is, the streets are shining, and there are fields of lilies. Sarah tells me when she puts me to bed.
Sarah, you are wicked, making fairy stories about heaven.
How do you know mine are fairy stories? But I can tell you, you'll never find out if they are or not, if you're not kinder to people than you are now. Come along, Lotty.
Sara marched out of the room, hoping to see the servant girl, but there was no trace of her. That night she asked her maid, Mariette, who the girl was, and was told that she was a scullery maid, a forlorn little thing who had just started work at the school, was half-starved, bullied by everyone, and although she only looked 12, was 14. Her name was Becky. A few days later, on another foggy afternoon, Sara entered her sitting room and found herself confronting a pathetic picture. In her favourite easy chair, before the bright fire, Becky, with a coal smudge on her nose, her poor little cap all awry, and the empty coal box on the floor, sat fast asleep. Becky always saved Sarah's room till last. It seemed a bar of luxury, with Emily in a chair of her own, and lovely soft furnishings everywhere. Sometimes she would snatch a few minutes to sit down in the easy chair and think about the good fortune of the child who owned such beautiful things. On this afternoon, the glow of warmth from the fire had crept over her like a spell. Her head nodded forward, her eyes drooped, and she fell fast asleep. She had only been asleep for about 10 minutes when Sara, wearing a beautiful rose-coloured frock, had floated into the room, and there sat Becky, not a sleeping beauty, just an ugly, worn-out little scullery drudge.
Oh, dear. Oh, miss, I ask your pardon, miss. Oh, I do, miss. I'm so sorry.
Don't be frightened, Becky. It doesn't matter the least bit.
I didn't mean to do it, miss. It was the warm fire and me being so tired. It wasn't impudence.
Becky, you were tired. You could not help it. You're not really awake yet, and you have a right to be tired.
Aren't you angry, miss?
No, of course I'm not, Becky. Why? We're just the same. I'm only a little girl like you. That I am not you, and you are not me, is just an accident.
An accident, miss? Is it?
Yes. Becky, no one is about. If your bedrooms are finished, perhaps you might stay a little while.
Here, miss? Me?
Yes. Perhaps you might like a piece of cake.
But, miss... Oh, I thank you, miss.
The next 10 minutes seemed to Becky like a sort of delirium. She devoured the cake in hungry bites, while Sara laughed and asked her questions until Becky's fears began to calm themselves, and she even dared to ask a question herself.
That dress you're wearing, miss, is it your best?
It's one of my dancing frocks. I like it. Do you?
Oh, yes, miss. Once I was standing in a crowd outside Covent Garden watching the swells go into the opera, and there was one everyone stared at most. Then someone says, "That's the princess." I called her to mind the moment I saw you, miss. You look like her.
I've often thought I'd like to be a princess. I wonder what it feels like. I believe I will begin pretending I am one. Becky, weren't you listening to that story the other day?
Yes, miss. I knowed I hadn't ought to, but it was beautiful. I couldn't help it.
I liked you to listen. Would you like to hear the rest of the story?
Me hear it? Like as if I was a pupil, miss? About the white mermaids with stars in their hair?
Yes. You haven't time to hear it now, I'm afraid. But if you tell me what time you come to do my rooms, I will try and be here and tell you a bit of it every day, till it is finished.
Then I wouldn't mind how heavy the coal boxes was, or what the cook done to me, if I might have that to think of.
Well, you can. I'll tell it all to you.
When Becky went downstairs, she was a different person. She had an extra piece of cake in her pocket, and she had not only been fed and warmed by the cake and fire, but by Sara too. Not very long after this, a very exciting thing happened, which became the chief subject of conversation in the school. Captain Crew had written to Sara with an interesting story about an old friend who had come to see him. This friend owned some land on which diamonds had been found and was developing mines there. If all went well, a large fortune would be made, and because of their friendship, Captain Crew had been invited to become a partner in the scheme. Normally, any business scheme would have been of no interest to Sara or the others, but diamond mines sounded so like Arabian Nights that no one could be indifferent. Sara thought them enchanting and told stories, painting pictures of labyrinthine passages where sparkling stones were dug out of the walls and roofs to be worn by a princess. After this, the girls who were jealous of her used to speak of her as Princess Sara, and those who were fond of her used it as a term of affection. And to Becky, it seemed the most appropriate thing in the world. Her acquaintance with Sara had ripened and grown. Not only did Sara tell her stories, but smuggle in meat pies and rolls and sausages for her. And in time, Becky began to lose her tired, hungry feeling, and the coal box did not seem so unbearably heavy. No matter who shouted at her, or how heavy her work was, she always had a few snatched moments to look forward to in Sara's sitting room. But Sara had not the least idea what she meant to Becky. She didn't realise that kindness and comfort and laughter was as filling to Becky as the meat pies. Some weeks before Sara's 11th birthday, her father had arranged great festivities for her. The schoolroom was to be decorated and a party held, and a glittering feast with boxes of presents opened with great ceremony. When Sara went into her sitting room, she found on the table a small dumpy package tied up in brown paper. She opened it carefully. It was a pin-cushion made of clean red flannel, and black pins were studded into it to spell NENYHAPPY many happy returns.
Oh, what pain she has taken. It makes me feel so sorrowful.
Do you like it, Miss Sarah? Do you?
Like it? Oh, you darling Becky. You made it all yourself.
Oh, it ain't nothing but flanning. Oh, flanning. I knew you could pretend it was satin with diamond pins in it. I tried to when I was making it.
Oh, Becky. I love you, Becky. I do.
Oh, miss, thank you kindly. It ain't good enough for that. The flanning weren't new. When Sarah entered the holly-hung schoolroom in the afternoon, Miss Minchin led her by the hand, followed by 2 servants and Becky carrying boxes.
Silence, young ladies. You servants, put the boxes on the table. Becky, it is not your place to look at the young ladies. Put your box down. You may leave.
If you please, Miss Minchin, may Becky stay?
Becky, my dearest Sarah.
I know she would like to see my presents. She is a little girl too, you know.
My dear Sarah, Becky is a scullery maid, not a little girl.
But Becky is... Please let her stay, because it is my birthday.
Well, as a birthday favour, she may stay. Rebecca, thank Miss Sarah for her great kindness.
Thank you, miss. And thank you, ma'am, for letting me take the liberty.
Go and stand there, and not too near the young ladies. Now, young ladies, I have a few words to say to you. You are aware that dear Sarah is 11 years old today. That is why she is having this special party. When she is older, she will be heiress to a large fortune, and she has been placed by her father at my seminary in order to be educated and learn how to spend her money in a meritorious manner. She has become my most accomplished pupil, and her manners, which have caused you all to call her Princess Sarah, are perfect. Now, I wish you to express your appreciation of being asked to Sarah's birthday party.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you all for coming.
Very pretty, Sarah, and a pretty curtsy. Just what a real princess would do when the populace applauds her. Now, I leave you all to enjoy yourselves.
The instant she swept out of the room, there was a rush towards the boxes. From the biggest box, Sarah took out a magnificent doll, and from another box she took the doll's clothes. There were lace collars, silk stockings, necklaces, tiaras, 5 magnificent dresses, hats, tea gowns and furs. Then Sarah explained that this was to be her last doll. She had told her father that she would soon be too old to play with dolls, but the school would love it. So he had sent her this last doll and all the luxurious clothes she would require. In great excitement, the pupils were then taken into the parlour by Miss Amelia, where a wonderful feast was waiting for them. A few moments later, Miss Minchin entered the empty schoolroom with an unexpected visitor. A sharp-featured, dry little gentleman who had introduced himself as Mr. Barrow, the solicitor in charge of Captain Crew's affairs.
Pray be seated, Mr. Barrow.
Thank you, Miss Minchin. Is that doll there Sarah's?
Yes, beautiful, isn't it? So fitting for the dear child.
£100. And from Paris. Mad extravagance, I call it.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Barrow. Captain Crew is a man of fortune. The diamond mines alone...
There are no diamond mines. There never were.
What? What do you mean?
Diamond mines often spell ruin. The late Captain Crew...
The late Captain Crew?
Oh, yes. He's dead, ma'am. Died of jungle fever and business troubles combined.
How do you mean? Business troubles. What business troubles?
Diamond mines. He lost every penny. His dear friend was mad about his diamond mines and put all his own money into it, and Captain Crew's. And then the dear friend ran away. The shock killed Captain Crew, and he died delirious, raving about his little girl, and didn't leave a penny.
Do you mean to tell me he left nothing? That Sara is left on my hands as a beggar instead of an heiress?
She certainly is a beggar, and no relation in this world, ma'am.
It's monstrous. She's in there now, dressed in silk gauze and petticoats, giving a party at my expense.
It is at your expense, ma'am. There never was a cleaner sweep of a man's fortune. Captain Crew died without paying our last bill, and it was a big one.
And mine, too. I've paid for everything since the last cheque came. Carriage and pony, maid, that ridiculous doll, that fantastic wardrobe, everything she wanted.
Well, you'd better not pay for anything more, ma'am. She hasn't a brass farthing to call her own.
What am I to do?
Well, nothing much. She's your responsibility.
I refuse to be made responsible. I have been robbed and cheated. I will turn her out into the street.
That would make an unpleasant story, ma'am. Pupil bundled out penniless and without friends. Better keep her here and use her. She's clever, I believe. You can get a great deal out of her before she gets older.
I will get a great deal out of her before she gets older.
I am sure you will, ma'am. Quite sure. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Princess Sara, indeed. That pampered, spoilt child left on my hands. Who's that? Come out from under that table. Oh, it's you. How dare you?
I'm sorry, ma'am. I know I hadn't ought to, but I was looking at the doll, ma'am, and I was frightened when you come in, so I slipped under the table.
Have you been there all the time, listening?
No, ma'am. I wasn't listening, ma'am, but I couldn't help overhearing. Oh, please, ma'am. I'm so sorry for Miss Sara, ma'am. I'm so sorry.
Leave the room, now.
Yes, ma'am. I will, ma'am. I just want to ask you, ma'am. Now Miss Sara won't be waited on hand and foot and finger. Can I wait on her when I've finished me pots and pans and kettles? I'll do 'em that quick. Oh, poor Miss Sara, ma'am.
Sara will be waiting on herself and on other people from now on. Now leave this room immediately, or you leave this place.
Miss Amelia told Sara what had happened to her father. To Miss Amelia's surprise, she had not said a word. But when several of the other children had started to cry, Sara had turned and run out of the room and upstairs. Alone in her room, she had moaned, "My papa is dead," over and over again. Miss Minchin had never looked so still and hard as she did when Sara came to her a few hours later in response to a message she had sent to her. Her face was white, and her eyes had dark rings round them. Now, instead of beautiful clothes, she wore a cast-aside, short, tight velvet frock, which made her legs look long and thin. Her dark hair tumbled over her pallid face, and in one arm she grasped Emily, who was swathed in black.
Put down that doll. What do you mean, bringing her in here?
I will not put her down. She is all I have left that my papa gave to me.
You'll have no time for dolls in the future. Everything will be very different now. I suppose Miss Amelia has explained matters to you?
Yes. My papa is dead. He left no money. I am quite poor.
Poor? You are a beggar. No relations or friends, and no home. I tell you, you have no one, and nowhere to go, unless I choose to keep you here out of charity. Do you understand?
I understand. Yes, I understand.
That ridiculous doll, the one you had for your birthday, with all those extravagant things, I paid the bill for them.
The last doll.
The last doll, indeed. And she's mine, not yours. Like everything else of yours, she is mine.
Please take her away from me, then. I do not want it.
Don't you put on grand airs with me, miss. You are not a princess now. Your maid is dismissed, and your carriage and pony are gone. You will wear your oldest and plainest clothes. You are like Becky now. You must work for your living, and do anything you are told to do. Make yourself useful, and you may be allowed to stay here. You can help teach French to the younger children, and you will run errands and help in the kitchen. And if you don't please me, you will be sent away. Remember that. Now go. Stop! Don't you intend to thank me?
What for?
For my kindness in giving you a home.
You are not kind, and it is not a home. Now may I go to my room?
Your room? That is not your room now. You will sleep in the attic, next to Becky. Now go. Go!
Sara knew where the attic room was. When she reached the door and opened it, her heart gave a dreary little thump. It was another world. The room had a slanting roof with peeling whitewash on the walls. There was a rusty grate, an old iron bedstead, a hard bed with a faded coverlet, and some old pieces of furniture. Under the skylight, which showed nothing but an oblong piece of grey sky, there stood an old battered red footstool. Sara sat down on it, not making a sound. And then, in the silence, came a low tap on the door. After a moment it was opened, and Becky's tear-stained face peeked round it. "Oh, miss, would you allow me just to come in?"
Oh, Becky, come in. I told you we were just the same, only two little girls. You see how true it is. There is no difference now. I'm not a princess any more.
"Oh, yes, miss, you are. Whatever happens to you, whatever, you'd be a princess, and nothing couldn't make you nothing different." Sara never forgot her first night in the attic room, which she passed in a wild, unchildlike woefulness. She kept whispering to herself, "My father is dead. My father is dead," while the wind howled over the roof, and she covered her head with the thin bedclothes to hide the scratching and squeaking that she knew from Becky came from the rats living there. From that moment onwards, her life changed rapidly. Apart from teaching the young ones French, she was sent on errands in all winds and weathers and at all times, and cook and the housemaids enjoyed ordering about a girl who had previously been made such a fuss of. Lavinia and some others were spiteful to her, and there were hours when her heart might have broken but for 3 people. The first was Becky. Just Becky. Before daybreak she would slip into Sara's room and button her dress and help her in any way she required, and at night would give a humble little tap on her door to let her know she was about if she was needed. The second of the trio of comforters was Ermengarde. One night, as Sara wearily went to her room later than usual, she was surprised to see a light coming from under the door, and on opening it found Ermengarde there, dressed in her nightgown and wrapped up in a red shawl.
Ermengarde, you'll get into trouble being here.
I don't care. I don't care a bit. Oh, Sara, please tell me. What's the matter? Why don't you like me anymore?
But I do like you, Ermengarde. I thought, well, you see, everything is different now. I thought you were different.
It's you who's different, Sara. You don't talk to me. I don't know what to do.
I am different, Ermengarde. Miss Minchin doesn't want me to talk to the girls, and most of them don't want to talk to me either. I thought perhaps you didn't, so I've kept out of your way.
Oh, Sara, I dare say you can live without me, but I can't live without you. That's why I crept up here tonight, to beg you to be friends again.
You're nicer than I am, Ermengarde. I was too proud to try and make friends.
Oh, Sara, do you think you can bear to live in this awful place?
If I pretend it is quite different, I can. Other people have lived in worse places. Think of those poor people who lived in the Bastille.
The Bastille? Oh, yes. I remember the stories you told me about that place.
I shall pretend I am in the Bastille, and Miss Minchin is the jailer, and I have been here for years and years, and Becky is the prisoner in the next cell. I shall pretend that, and it will be a great comfort.
And will you tell me about it, Sara? And may I creep up here when it is safe, and hear your stories and be best friends again?
Yes. Adversity tries people, and mine has tried you, and proved how nice you are.
The third person in the trio was Lotty. She was too small to understand what had happened to Sara, her adopted mother, but she did realise that Sara was different, and was very sad when she was told by the girls that Sara was as poor as a beggar. She sensed, too, that Miss Minchin would be cross if she spoke to Sara during their French lessons. But Lotty was a determined little person, and one day, when Sara opened her attic room door, she saw Lotty standing on her table looking out of the window.
Lotty!
Sara! Mamma, Sara! What a terrible room this is!
Don't cry or make a noise, please, Lotty. I shall be scolded if you do, and I've been scolded all day. It's not such a bad room, Lotty.
Isn't it? Why isn't it, Sara? Hug me, please, Sara.
All right.
Why isn't it a bad room, Sara?
Because from the window you can see the rooftops and sparrows hopping about, and other attic windows where heads may pop out, and you can wonder who they belong to. And it feels high up, like another world.
Oh, lift me up. Let me see.
So Sara lifted her up, and they stood on the table and leaned on the ledge of the flat window, looking out together across the slates spread out on either side. Miss Minchin and her school seemed to belong to another existence, and by the time Lotty was lifted down into the room again, she was very happy. Then Sara went round the room, holding Lottie's hand, and described all the imaginary beautiful things she was making herself see. She made Lottie see them too, because Lottie always believed in the things Sara made pictures of. And when she finally persuaded Lottie to go downstairs again, the child stood at the door and smiled.
Oh, Sara, I should love to live here.
But when Sara was alone, the enchantment soon died. Suddenly, her attention was attracted by a slight sound near her. She saw a large rat sniffing the air in an interested manner. Sara was fascinated. She sat and watched him without making any movement. The rat sniffed delicately, then darted back to its hole. Sara laughed.
Now I really am in the Bastille. He is a Bastille rat, sent to be my friend. I will find a piece of bread that cook throws away every night, and feed him and his family. And I will name him Melchizedek.
And she did feed him every night until he became almost tame. And she really could imagine that she was in the Bastille, especially when she heard the secret knock come from Becky's room next door each night, which said, "Sleep in peace, fellow sufferer. Good night." And she would tap back and say quietly to herself,
It is all a story. Everything is a story. I am a story. We are all a story. Even Miss Minchin is a story.
It was a perilous thing for Ermengarde and Lotty to make pilgrimages to the attic, so their visits were rare, and Sara led a strange and lonely life. When she was sent out for errands, this forlorn little figure, with the water soaking through her shoes and trying to hold her hat on in the wind, felt as if the crowds hurrying past made her loneliness even greater. There were several families in the square in which she lived, but the family she liked best she called the large family, because there were so many of them, and they always seemed to be doing something enjoyable and laughing together. One evening, just as Sara was about to pass the large family's door, the children came out to get into an awaiting carriage. The youngest child, Guy Clarence, who was 5 years old, saw Sara standing on the wet pavement in her shabby clothes, looking at him. He put his hand in his pocket, found sixpence, and walked up to Sara and offered it to her benignly. At first, Sara refused it, but when he insisted, took it and thanked him graciously. As the large family's carriage drove away, the children inside talked with interested excitement as Guy Clarence told them how gracious she had been. They all decided she was not a real beggar girl, despite her appearance, and named her the little girl who is not a beggar. One morning, on turning the corner of the square, after running several errands, Sara saw a van full of furniture outside the house next door, and men with shirt sleeves going in and out carrying heavy packages and pieces of furniture. Her heart gave a quick beat when she saw some of the furniture set out upon the pavement, the sight of which gave her a weird, homesick feeling. She had seen things so like them in India. When she was taking in the evening's milk for the cook, she saw something most interesting occur. The big rosy man, who was the father of the large family, walked across the square and ran up the steps of the next-door house, and it seemed obvious that he was in some intimate way connected with the newcomers. And that night, after her work was done, Becky came in to see her fellow prisoner and bring her news.
"It's an Indian gentleman that's coming to live next door, miss. He's very rich, and he's ill, and the gentleman who's the father of the large family is his lawyer. He's ill because he's had a lot of troubles, and he worships idols. He's an heathen, 'cause I seen an idol being carried in for him to worship."
I don't believe he worships that idol, Becky. Some people have them because they are interesting. My father had a beautiful one, but he did not worship it.
"No, I think he's an heathen, miss. I hope so, 'cause I've never lived next door to heathens, and I should like to see what sorts of ways they got."
A carriage drew up one day and stopped before the house. When a footman opened the carriage door, the father of the large family got out first, followed by a nurse in uniform and 2 men servants. They came to assist their master, who, when helped out of the carriage, proved to be a man with a haggard, distressed face and a skeleton body wrapped up in furs. He was carried up the steps, and shortly afterwards the doctor's carriage arrived and the doctor went in. On those nights, when she had finished her labour, she would creep up the flight of stairs, climb on the old table, and put her head and body as far out of the window as possible. Then it would seem to her that she had all the glowing sky and the world to herself, and nothing could be more beautiful than the things she saw from her attic window. There were fine sunsets even in the square sometimes, and one of the best places to see the splendour of them was from the skylight window in Sara's attic. There was such a sunset as this a few days after the Indian gentleman came. Fortunately, it was one of those rare afternoons when she had no errands to run, so she found she could slip away and go upstairs. In her room, she mounted the table and stood looking out of the window at the molten golden sky in the west. Suddenly, she turned her head because she heard an odd, shattering sound coming from the window of the neighbouring attic. She saw the white turbaned head of an Indian and knew the sound she had heard came from a small monkey he cradled in his arms. Sara thought the Indian's dark face looked sorrowful and homesick, so she smiled at him across the slates. As he smiled back, the impish little monkey broke loose, ran across the slates and leapt onto Sara's shoulder and then ran down into her attic room. It made her laugh, but she knew he must be restored to his master. She turned to the Indian and asked if the monkey would let her catch him. He explained that the monkey was a good monkey, but unfortunately was disobedient to everyone except himself, Ram Dass, and if he was not taking too much of a liberty, it would be better if she would let him come across and catch the monkey himself. Sara thought it would be a good idea, and Ram Dass slipped through his window and across the slates, through the skylight, and dropped into Sara's room without a sound. Then, after a short chase, he gathered the monkey into his arms and thanked Sara profusely. Then he salaamed and got through the skylight and went back across the slates with as much agility as the monkey himself had displayed. When he had gone, Sara stood and thought of many things his face and manner had brought back to her. She thought of her luxurious past and of how it contrasted with her present situation. There seemed nothing now to look forward to. Then a thought came to her, and her eyes sparkled. She straightened her thin little body and lifted her head and spoke aloud to herself.
Whatever comes cannot alter one thing. If I am a princess in rags and tatters, I can be a princess inside. It would be easy to be a princess dressed in cloth of gold, but it is a great deal more of a triumph to be a princess when no one knows it.
When one lives in a row of town houses, it is interesting to think of the things being done and said on the other side of the wall. One day, when Ermengarde had managed to come to her attic room, Sara was saying how often she thought about the Indian gentleman next door, and how she was growing quite fond of him.
I have adopted him as a friend. You can do that with some people you never speak to. You can think about them and worry about them almost like a relation.
I have very few relations, and I'm very glad of it. I don't like those I do have. They're always telling me I'm too fat, or asking me silly questions.
People you never speak to can't ask you silly questions. I'm sure the Indian gentleman wouldn't. I feel so sorry for him, though. In the kitchen they say he is recovering from a severe illness.
He's not really Indian, is he? He's an Englishman who has lived in India for a long time.
Yes, and he met with some misfortune and thought himself ruined, and almost died of a brain fever. And although his fortunes have been restored to him, his health is still shattered.
How was he nearly ruined?
Diamond mines, just like my poor papa. He must have felt just as he did, but my papa died.
All this information Sara had gathered from the servants in the seminary, but there were certain things the servants did not know. The father of the large family, Mr. Carmichael, went to see the Indian gentleman most days. Quite often took Mrs. Carmichael and all the little Carmichaels too. They were fond of him as he was of them. The Indian gentleman's real name was Mr. Carrisford, and Janet, the eldest of the Carmichael's children, told Mr. Carrisford about their encounter with the little girl who was not a beggar and was a servant in the school next door. Mr. Carrisford was much interested, and all the more so when Ram Dass told him about the adventure with the monkey and painted a vivid picture of the bare poverty and desolateness of Sara's attic room. After he had heard Ram Dass's story, he had a talk with Mr. Carmichael,
I wonder how many attics like that one are in this square. How many servant girls sleep on such beds, while I toss on my pillows, harassed by wealth that is most of it not mine. Do you think it possible that the other child could possibly be reduced to such a condition as the little soul next door?
If the child at Madame Pascal's school was the one you are in search of, she'll be in good hands. The people who adopted her were very wealthy Russians somewhere and have no other children.
But you say, if the child was the one I'm searching for. You say if.
Because Madame Pascal pronounced it differently, as if it were Carew instead of Crew. But the circumstances were, I admit, curiously similar. An English officer in India had placed his motherless daughter at a school in Paris. Are you sure the child was left in Paris?
Oh, I'm sure of nothing. I never saw either the mother or the child. Ralph Crew and I loved each other as boys, but had not met since our school days. Then we both became so completely absorbed in the diamond mines we scarcely spoke of anything else. All I know is that she was sent to school somewhere, and as her mother was French, Paris seemed the most likely place.
Aye, that does seem the most probable.
Oh, Carmichael, I've got to find her. If she is friendless and penniless, it is my fault. This sudden change of luck at the diamond mines has realized our most fantastic dreams, and poor Crew's child may be begging in the street. Crew put everything he owned into those mines. He trusted me. He loved me like a brother, and died thinking I had ruined him. What a villain he must have thought me. I ran away because I did not have the courage to tell my best friend that I had ruined him and his child.
You didn't run away. You had a brain fever and you were strapped down in a hospital bed raving with it. How could a man in that condition think clearly?
And when I returned to consciousness, poor Crew was dead and buried. For weeks I could remember nothing, and did not remember the child for months and months. Even when I did recall her existence, it was in a sort of haze.
You never seemed able to recall her real name.
No, he used to call her by a pet name, his little missus. But we were so wrapped up in the mines we talked of nothing else. If he spoke of a school, I forget. And now I shall never remember.
Come, we shall find her yet. We will still try and find that little girl that was in Paris. I will go to Moscow and make inquiries there.
Sometimes I dream of Ralph Crew at night, and he is always standing before me saying, "Tom, old man, Tom, where is my little missus?" Carmichael, I must be able to answer him. Help me find her. Help me, please.
On the other side of the wall, Sarah was sitting talking to Melchizedek, who had come out of his hole for his evening meal. She was telling him what a horrible day she had had, especially for a princess. Then suddenly she put her head down in her arms and whispered,
"Oh, Papa, what a long time ago it seems since I was your little missus."
This is what happened that day on both sides of the wall. The winter was a wretched one. Sarah tramped on her errands through the snow, the mud, and the slush. It was bitterly cold, and sometimes in the attic bedrooms, Becky and Sarah would huddle together to try and keep warm. On one very wet day, something odd happened to Sarah. Soaking wet and squelching in her broken shoes through the mud, and shivering with the chill, she saw a shiny fourpenny piece on the pavement. She could hardly believe her eyes. And then she saw a baker's shop directly facing her, with a stout, motherly woman putting into the window a fresh tray of newly baked buns. Large, plump, shiny buns with currants in them. Sarah felt faint at the shock and the sight of the buns and the delicious odours of warm bread floating through the window. She was just about to go into the shop when something made her stop. It was a little figure, more forlorn than herself, who was not much more than a bundle of rags. Above the rags, a appeared a shock of tangled hair and a dirty face with big, hollow, hungry eyes. Sara knew that this child was even hungrier than she was. She clutched her fourpenny piece.
Are you hungry?
Ain't I just? Just ain't I?
Have you had any dinner?
No dinner, no breakfast, nor yet no supper. Nothing.
Since when?
Dunno. Never got nothing today, though I've asked and asked.
Wait a minute while I go into the baker's.
Yes, dear?
If you please, have you lost a fourpence? A silver fourpence?
Bless us, no. Did you find it?
Yes, in the gutter.
You keep it then. It could have been there for a week.
I know, but I thought I would ask you.
Not many would, my dear. Do you want to buy something?
Yes, 4-penny buns, please. No, 4 if you please. You've taken 6. I only have 4pence.
I'll throw in 2 for make-weight, me dear. I dare say you can eat them sometime. Aren't you hungry?
Oh, yes, I'm very hungry, and I'm much obliged for your kindness.
Sara thanked the woman and went out. The beggar girl was still huddled up. Sara took out a bun and gave her one. The child snatched at it and began to cram it into her mouth with great wolfish bites. Sara took out 4 more buns and gave them to her. The little ravening savage was still devouring them when Sara turned away. The girl said nothing. She was eating like a poor, wild, starving animal. When Sara reached the other side of the street, she looked back. The child had a bun in each hand and had stopped in the middle of a bite to watch her. And until Sara was out of sight, she did not take another bite or even finish the one she had begun. At that moment, the woman came out of her shop.
Who gave you those buns? What did she say?
Asked me if I was hungry, and I told her I was.
And then she came into the shop, bought them and gave them to you?
Yep.
How many?
5.
Left just one for herself. And she could have eaten all 6. I saw it in her eyes. I wish she hadn't gone so quick. I'm blessed if she wouldn't have had a dozen. Are you still hungry?
I'm always hungry, missus.
Come on into the shop then. Get yourself warm. And look, when you're hard up for a bit of bread, come in here and ask for it. I'm blessed if I won't give it to you for that young one's sake.
Sara found comfort in her remaining bun. She broke off a small piece and ate it slowly to make it last longer, pretending it was a magic bun and that each bite was as much as a whole dinner. It was dark when she reached the square, and a great deal of excitement was going on outside the large family's house. Sara paused a moment in the shadows. She heard the father say that he would send them pictures from Moscow, and as he ran down the steps to his carriage, Guy Clarence called out, "If you find the little girl, send her our love." And they went in and shut the door. Sara crossed the square to Miss Minchin's area steps, wondering who the little girl was that the father was going to look for. On this very afternoon, while Sara was out, a strange thing happened in her attic. Only Melchizedek saw it and was much alarmed by it. The skylight opened and 2 men dropped down into the room. One was Ram Dass, and the other was a young man who was the Indian gentleman's secretary. Melchizedek scampered back to his hole, frightened to death. The secretary caught a glimpse of the vanishing tail.
Was that a rat?
Oh, yes, a rat, Sab. There are many in the walls.
Oh, it's a wonder the child is not terrified by them.
She is not like other children, Sab. I often slip across the slates to see if she is safe, and I watch her from my window when she does not know I am near. The sparrows come at her call, and she has fed and tamed the rat in her loneliness. The poor slave of the house comes to her for comfort, and there is a little child who comes to her in secret, and an older one who worships her and would listen to her forever. But the mistress of the house, who is an evil woman, treats her like a pariah. but she has the bearing of a child who is the blood of kings. I have seen all this when I have crept across the roof.
You seem to know a great deal about her.
All her life each day I know. Her comings and goings and friends' secret visits.
You are sure she will not return and surprise us? She would be frightened if she found us here, and Sara Crewe's plan would be spoiled.
She is out with the basket, and may be gone for hours. No one else comes here.
Right. But keep your ears open while I go around the room and make some notes. Bed, hard as stone. That will have to be altered. Coverlet, dingy and worn. Sheets, patched and ragged. There's not been a fire in that grate for many a day either. What a room in a house which calls itself respectable.
The mistress of this house is not one who considers others sub.
Right. By the way, this is a strange way of doing things. Who planned it?
The first thought was mine. Then one day, when the sub was very ill and wretched, I told him about the girl and this room, and how I had one night heard the girl talk about a vision of what her room would be like if it had comforts in it. It pleased the sab, and he began to please himself with the thought of making her vision real.
You think it can be done while she sleeps? Suppose she is awakened.
I can move as if my feet were of velvet. If the other bearer passes to me the things through the window, I can do all, and she will not stir. When she awakens, she will think a magician has been there. It will be like a story from the Arabian Nights. Only an Oriental could have planned it. It does not belong to London folks.
True. Well, I think I have made notes enough. We can go now. The Sab Casford has a warm heart. It is 1,000 pities that he has not found the lost child.
If he should find her, his strength would be restored to him. His God may lead him to her yet.
Then they slipped out of the skylight as noiselessly as they had entered, and Melchizedek, greatly relieved, emerged from his hole in the faint hope that these alarming humans may have dropped a crumb or two. When Sara arrived at the seminary, Miss Minchin grumbled at her for being so long, and Cook was in a savage mood and would only give her some old dry bread to eat. Wearily she mounted the stairs to her attic room, and when she opened the door, she was pleased to see Ermengarde sitting on the bed with her feet tucked safely under her. The presence of the plump, comfortable Ermengarde, wrapped in her red shawl, warmed the cold room up a little. In great excitement, she told Sara that Miss Amelia was away for the night, and as no one else ever went to her room, she could stay with Sara till morning. And so they talked and talked about many things. But the truth was that Ermengarde did not know anything of Sara's unbearable life at the seminary. The room in the attic was a big adventure to her, and as they sat there together that night, Ermengarde did not know that Sara felt faint with hunger. It was just an exciting night for Ermengarde.
Sara, I wish I was as thin as you. Do you know, I believe you are thinner than you used to be.
I was always a thin child, and I always had big green eyes.
I love your eyes. They look as if they can see a long way.
They're cat's eyes, but I can't see in the dark with them. I wish I... What's that noise? I thought I heard someone on the slates.
Come here, girl.
I can hear a noise outside the door.
And I can, but that's a different noise. Listen.
What have you been up to? What do you think you've been doing, you dreadful, ignorant child?
It's Miss Minchin scolding Becky. She's making her cry.
Will she come in here?
No, she'll think I'm in bed. Don't stir.
She's coming up the stairs.
You impudent, dishonest child. Cook tells me she has missed things repeatedly.
It wasn't me, Mum. I was hungry, but it wasn't me.
You deserve to go to prison. Stealing half a meat pie, indeed.
It wasn't me. I could have ate a whole one, but I never laid a finger on it. Ow!
Don't tell falsehoods. Go to your room this instant.
The wicked, cruel thing. The cook takes things for herself, then says Becky steals them. But she doesn't. She doesn't. She's so hungry, sometimes she eats crusts out of the ash barrel. It's not fair. It's not fair.
Sara, you never told me. I don't want to be rude, but are you ever hungry?
Yes, I am. I'm so hungry now I could poor Becky. She's hungrier than I am.
Oh, Sara, I never knew.
I didn't want you to know. It would have made me feel like a beggar. I know I look like one.
No, you don't. You couldn't look like a beggar.
Well, a little boy from the large family once gave me a sixpence for charity, so I must do. I wear it on a ribbon round my neck. Look!
Oh, Sara, what a silly thing I am.
Why?
I just thought of something splendid. This afternoon, my favourite aunt sent me a hamper. It's got cakes in it, and meat pies, and jam tarts, and buns, and oranges, and figs, and chocolates. I never touched it. I had so much pudding at dinner. I'll creep back to my room and get it this minute, and we'll eat it now.
Do you think you could?
I know I could. The lights are all out. I can creep, and no one will hear.
Ermy! Let's pretend it's a party. And oh, won't we invite the prisoner in the next cell?
Yes. Knock on the wall now. The jailer won't hear.
That means come to my cell by the secret passage. I have something to communicate. She's coming.
Oh, Miss Ermengarde.
Don't mind me, Becky.
Miss Ermengarde had asked you to come in, Becky, because she is going to bring a box of good things up here to us.
To eat, miss? Things that's good to eat?
Yes, and we're going to pretend to have a party.
And you shall have as much as you want to eat. I'll go this minute.
She crept out in such haste that she dropped her red shawl. Sara stood still and put her hands over her eyes and called on her magic. And then the magic worked. Sara laughed and pulled the old table forward and spread the shawl over it like a tablecloth. Then, under Becky's amazed gaze, she arranged every piece of rubbish she could find around the room and placed it on the table. Some old clean handkerchiefs she pretended were gold plates. A soap dish was a centrepiece. A wreath of dusty flowers from an old hat were garlands for the feast, and tissue paper was used to ornament the candlesticks, which was to light the feast. When Ermengarde came staggering back under the weight of her hamper, she gave an exclamation of joy at the change.
Oh, Sara, you really are the clever girl.
Isn't it nice? It's my magic. Can't you almost see the gold platters, the soft carpet, the twinkling waxed tables?
Oh, yes. It's a real party. Help me take the food out of the hamper and lay it on the table.
It'll be like a princess's table.
I'll tell you what, Sara. Pretend you are a princess now, and we will be your maids of honour.
If you want me to. Now advance, fair damsels, and be seated at the banquet table. My noble father the king has ordered me to feast you. Minstrels, strike up, and let the banquet begin.
Shh! Shh! What's that? Oh, it's the missus.
Yes, Miss Minchin has found us out.
I suspected something of this sort, but I did not dream of such audacity. Lavinia was telling the truth. And you, Becky, you impudent creature!
Ow!
You leave this house in the morning.
Oh, don't send her away. My aunt sent me the hamper. We were only having a party.
So I see, with Princess Sara at the head of the table. And it's her doing too, Ermengarde. You would never have thought of such a thing. Tomorrow I shall write to your papa, and you, Princess Sara, I will attend to tomorrow. You shall have neither breakfast, dinner, nor supper.
I've had neither dinner or supper today.
Then all the better. Don't just stand there. Put those things back in the hamper. And why are you looking at me like that?
I was wondering.
What were you wondering?
I was wondering what my papa would say if he knew where I am tonight.
You insolent, unmanageable child! How dare you! I leave you to wonder. Come, Ermengarde!
Alone again, Sara sat down on the edge of her bed tired and hungry. Her eyes closed, and she fell asleep. She did not know how long she slept, but when she awakened, it was rather suddenly. She did not know that it was the click of the skylight as it fell closing that had aroused her. At first, she thought she was still dreaming. She felt so warm and cosy, as if warm bedclothes were heaped upon her. When she forced herself to open her eyes, she knew she was still dreaming. Do you wonder why? In the grate was a blazing fire. On the hob, a little brass kettle bubbling away. On the floor was a warm crimson rug. There were chairs with cushions, a folding table with covered dishes, and a cup and saucer and teapot. On the bed were warm coverings. At the foot, a silk robe, quilted slippers, and some books. The room had changed into fairyland, flooded in warm light from a bright table lamp covered with a rosy shade. She sat up, resting on her elbow, and her breathing came short and fast. Slowly, as if bewitched, she got out of bed and went to the fire. It was hot, and she knew if she was still dreaming, it wouldn't be hot. She touched the table, the dishes, the rug. She threw the robe over her shoulders and put her feet into the slippers.
They are real. It's all real. I am not dreaming. And the books are real. Everything is real. Real. And here is a note which is real. To the little girl in the attic, from a friend. Becky! Becky! Wake up! Wake up! I don't know who, but somebody cares for me a little. I have a friend. Becky! Becky! I can't believe it. I have a friend. I have a friend. Oh, Becky! Becky, look!
It's a dream, miss. It's a dream.
No, Becky, it's true. I've touched them all. The magic has come and done it, Becky, while we were asleep.
Imagine, if you can, what the rest of the evening was like. How they crouched by the fire, how they ate the hot savoury soup, and the toast, and the sandwiches and the muffins. But it cannot be denied that as they sat back, warm and full and happy, they kept wondering if it would melt away and pinch themselves to make sure they were awake. The sleepy comfort at length became too much. There were even enough blankets to share with Becky, to take to her own narrow couch, and as she went out of the room, Becky turned on the threshold and looked about her with devouring eyes and spoke quietly.
If it ain't here in the morning, miss, it's been here tonight anyways, and I shall never forget it.
The next morning, everyone knew that Sara was in disgrace, and Becky was to be sent packing. But the servants all knew that Sara and Becky were too cheap and useful for Miss Minchin to get rid of them until it suited her. They all knew, too, that Sara and Becky had had nothing to eat. But to their surprise, Becky's face was elated, and she even gurgled a little song. Miss Minchin, too, was quite shocked when Sara walked into the schoolroom with a springing step, colour in her cheeks, and a smile hovering in the corners of her mouth. And Lavinia was puzzled, and Miss Amelia was bewildered at such an audacious display. The weather that day was worse than ever, and the cook's temper was savage, and she sent Sara on more and more errands. But what does anything matter when one's magic has proved itself one's friend? Late that night, she reached the top flight of the stairs and stood before the attic door, and it must be confessed, her heart beat rather fast. She pushed open the door and went in. Once inside, she gasped slightly and shut the door with her back against it, looking from side to side. The magic had been there again, and more than ever. The fire was blazing in the grate. On the table another supper stood, with an extra cup and plate for Becky. All the bare, ugly things in the room had been covered, and there were several large cushions to be used as seats. Sara knocked on the wall for Becky.
I have always wanted to live in a fairy tale, and now I am. Look, Becky, the magic's been here again.
Oh, laws, miss. Oh, laws.
And there's a new mattress and pillow too.
Where does it all come from? Laws. Who does it, miss?
Don't let us even ask. If it were not that I want to say thank you, I would rather not know. It makes it more beautiful.
From that time, life became more wonderful, and almost every day something new and luxurious appeared. Although Miss Minchin was as harsh and insulting as ever, Miss Amelia as peevish, Lavinia as spiteful, and the servants rude and vulgar, it did not matter. The comfort and happiness Sara enjoyed was making her stronger and less thin, and colour came to her cheeks. Becky, too, was beginning to look plumper and less frightened. The Bastille had melted from their rooms, and the two comforted children would sit and read, or just look into the fire, wondering who Sara's friend could be. Then it came about that another wonderful thing happened. A man came to the seminary and left several parcels. Sara was sent to the door to collect them, and was looking at the address when Miss Minchin came down the stairs.
Take the things to the young lady to whom they belong. Don't stand staring at them.
They belong to me.
To you? What do you mean?
I don't know where they came from, but they are addressed to the little girl in the right-hand attic. I sleep in the right-hand attic.
What is it, then?
I don't know.
Open them.
Sara did as she was told. When the packages were opened, Miss Minchin's countenance wore a singular expression. There were shoes, stockings, gloves, a beautiful warm coat, even a nice hat and umbrella. They were all expensive, and there was a note saying, "To be worn every day, will be replaced when necessary." Miss Minchin's sordid mind was agitated. Could it be that she had made a mistake? That a neglected child had some powerful, unknown relative in the background? It would not be pleasant if there were one, and he should learn the truth about her treatment of Sara.
Well, someone is very kind to you, Sara. As the things have been sent, and you are to have new ones when they are worn out, you may as well put them on and look respectable. After you are dressed, you may come down to the schoolroom. You need not go out on any more errands today.
About half an hour later, when Sara walked into the schoolroom, all the girls were dumb with amazement. It was the Princess Sara again. It was surely not the same Sara they had seen on the back stairs a few hours ago. Now she was wearing a beautifully made frock, deep in colour, a pair of most delicate shoes, and her hair was tied back with a fine silk ribbon. Miss Minchin invited her to sit at her old desk, and Lavinia was scathingly envious as the whole schoolroom stared with excited curiosity. That night in her room, after she and Becky had eaten their supper, she sat and looked at the fire seriously for a long time. Then Sara's eyes fell on a little writing case, fitted with envelopes and pen and ink, standing on a corner table. She rose and brought the case back to the fire and wrote a note. This is what she said.
I hope you will not think that it is impolite that I should write to you when you wish to keep yourself secret. Please believe I only wish to thank you for being so kind to me. I'm so grateful to you and so happy, and so is Becky. It is all just as wonderful for her as it is for me. We used to be so lonely and cold and hungry, and now just think what you have done for us. Please let me say thank you, thank you, thank you. The little girl in the attic.
The next morning she left this note on the little table, and in the evening it had been taken away, so she knew the magician had received it, and she was happier for the thought. That night she was reading one of her new books to Becky before they went to bed, when they were distracted by a scratching sound coming from the skylight.
There's something there, miss. It sounds like a cat trying to get in. You going to look, miss?
Yes. Help me put the chair under the window, and I'll have a look. Just suppose it was the monkey again who got away. Oh, I wish it was. It is the monkey. He's crept out of his owner's attic, and he saw our light.
Are you going to let him in, miss?
Yes, it's terribly cold out there. Too cold for monkeys. They're delicate. I'll coax him. Come along, monkey darling. Come on. I won't hurt you. Come along, my dear little thing. There, there. There we are. I didn't hurt you, did I? You're cold, you poor little thing.
He's cuddling up to you to get warm, miss.
Yes. Come to the fire with me, little monkey. Nice monkey. Oh, I do love little animals. He's watching you, Becky.
I know, miss. He is plain looking, ain't he?
He looks like a very ugly baby. I beg your pardon, monkey. But oh, I do like you, monkey, my love.
He scratches a bit, don't he, miss? What you going to do with him?
I shall let him sleep here tonight and take him back to the Indian gentleman tomorrow. I'm sorry to have to take you back, monkey, but you must go back to your own family. I'm not a relation.
And when she went to bed, he curled up at her feet and slept as if he were a baby, very much pleased with his quarters. The next afternoon, 3 children from the large family were in the Indian gentleman's library. Their father was due back from Moscow at any moment. But fond of the children as he was, the Indian gentleman remained anxious and depressed, listening for the sound of their father's cab stopping at the door. When it finally came, the children tumbled out into the hall to greet him. When the happy greeting was over, Mr. Carmichael went in alone to tell Mr. Carrisford the news. He opened the door and saw the eager question in the invalid's eyes as they grasped each other's hands.
What news?
I'm sorry, my friend, but the child the Russians adopted is not the child we're searching for. She is younger than Captain Crew's little girl. I have seen and talked to her, and the Russians gave me every detail.
Then the search has to begin over again, that is all. Thank you for your efforts. Please, sit down. I never thought I could be so disappointed.
Come, we'll find her yet.
So, we must begin again at once. Have you any suggestions?
Well, we have searched all the schools in Paris, and it did occur to me that we might begin to search in London.
Yes, she must be somewhere. There are schools enough in London. Why, there is even one next door.
Let us begin there, then.
No. But there is a child there who interests me. A little dark, forlorn creature, as unlike poor Crew as a child could be.
Now, perhaps the magic was at work at that very moment. What else was it that brought Ram Dass into the room, even as his master spoke, with a touch of excitement in his flashing eyes?
Sab, the child the Sab felt pity for has come to the door. She brings back the monkey who ran away to our attic. I have asked her to remain.
Who is she?
Oh, God knows. A little drudge at the school next door. Yes, Ram Dass, bring her in. You see, Carmichael, during these dark days, Ram Dass and I have invented a romantic plan to help the girl. Childish, perhaps, but it gave me something to think about. Yes, my child.
Sir, your monkey ran away. I would have brought him back last night, but I knew you were ill and might not like to be disturbed.
That was very thoughtful of you.
Shall I give him to the Lascar?
Yes. How did you know he was a Lascar?
I know Lascars. I was born in India.
You were born in India, were you? Come here, my child. You live next door at Miss Minchin's seminary?
Yes, but I'm not one of the pupils. At first I was a pupil, then a parlour maid, and now...
You were a pupil? What are you now?
I don't know exactly. I sleep in the attic. I run errands for the cook, anything I'm told to do. I teach the little ones and...
Question her, Carmichael, question her. I cannot.
What do you mean, at first you were a pupil, my child?
Well, I was first taken there by my papa, before he lost all his money and died. After that, there was no money for me, and no one to take care of me or pay Miss Minchin.
So you were sent to the attic and made a drudge?
Yes.
How did your father lose his money?
He did not lose it himself. He had a friend who he was very fond of. It was his friend who took the money.
The friend might not have meant to do harm. It might have happened through a mistake.
Perhaps, but it killed my papa.
What was your father's name?
Ralph Crew, Captain Crew. He died in India.
Oh, Carmichael, it is the child. The child. The child.
Sab, you will be ill again.
What child?
My dear, Mr. Carrisford is your father's friend. We've been looking for you for 2 years.
For 2 years? And I was at Miss Minchin's all the while, on the other side of the wall.
It was Mrs. Carmichael who explained everything to Sara. She was sent for at once and came across the square to take Sara into her warm arms and make clear to her all that had happened. How Mr. Carrisford, the Indian gentleman, was not really wicked to Sara's father and did not lose his money, but only thought he had. How he had brain fever through grief and only recovered after Captain Crew had died. How he had searched far and wide to find his poor friend's daughter, and the failure to find her had made him so ill. Sara had looked very sad through the whole story. Then Mrs. Carmichael told how he had seen Sara looking so neglected, and did not dream she was the girl he was looking for, but feeling sorry for her, had planned with Ram Das to climb into her attic every day and make her comfortable. Sara gave a start of joy when she heard this, and her whole look changed. And when, a few minutes later, Mr. Carmichael called her into the library and said the Indian gentleman was feeling much better now and would like to see her, she couldn't wait. She went to the Indian gentleman and knelt down by him, just as she used to kneel by her dearest father. And she thanked him and thanked him. He looked happy at last and called her his little missus. Then he told her about his plans and the happy days that lay ahead. She was not to return to the seminary, and Mr. Carmichael should go and see Miss Minchin and tell her so. But oddly enough, Miss Minchin made it unnecessary for Mr. Carmichael to go to her by coming in search of her pupil herself. One of the housemaids had reported having seen Sara go into the house next door with something hidden under her cloak, and Miss Minchin decided to inquire into the matter and apologize for Sara's intrusion.
I am sorry to disturb you, Mr. Carrisford. I am Miss Minchin, the proprietor of the ladies' seminary next door.
So, you are Miss Minchin?
I am, sir. I am here as a matter of duty. One of my pupils, a charity pupil, of course, I understand has intruded upon you. I came to explain she intruded without my knowledge. You, Sara, go home at once. You shall be severely punished. Go home at once, now.
She is not going.
Not going?
No, she is not going home, if you give your house that name. Her home for the future will be with me.
With you, sir?
Oh, kindly explain the matter, Carmichael?
Madam, Mr. Carrisford was an intimate friend and partner of Captain Crew. The fortune which Captain Crew thought lost has been recovered and is in Mr. Carrisford's hands.
Fortune?
Yes, it is Sarah's fortune now, and has indeed increased enormously. The diamond mines have retrieved themselves.
The diamond mines?
There are not many princesses, Miss Minchin, who are richer than your charity pupil. Mr. Carrisford has been searching for her for 2 years. He has found her at last.
He found her under my care. I have done everything for her. But for me, she would have starved in the streets.
That might have been more comfortable than in your attic.
Captain Crew left her in my charge. She must return until she comes of age. She must finish her education. The law will interfere on my behalf.
Come, Miss Minchin. The law will do nothing of the sort. The decision rests with Sarah.
Then I appeal to you, Sarah. I have not spoiled you, perhaps, Sarah, but, I have always been fond of you.
Have you, Miss Minchin? You know perfectly well that I will not go home with you. And why?
All right. You will not see your companions again. Ermengarde and Lotty will be kept away.
She shall see anyone she wishes to see. The parents of Miss Crew's friends are not likely to refuse her invitations to visit her guardian's house. Mr. Carrisford will attend to that.
You have not undertaken an easy charge. She is neither grateful or truthful. I suppose you, Sarah, now feel that you are a princess again.
I tried not to be anything else. Even at my coldest and hungriest, I tried not to be.
Now you will not have to try. Good day to you all.
That night, the seminary was in an uproar. In the schoolroom, there was a buzz of excitement as Ermengarde read and reread a letter she had had from Sarah, telling her all that had taken place. Even Miss Minchin made no effort to control the uproar. She was not in a mood to face anything more, and she knew, too, the news had penetrated the walls and that every girl and servant was talking about it. But Becky had heard it too, and crept upstairs to her empty room. Glad as she was for Sarah, there was a lump in her throat and tears blurring her sight. There would be no fire that night, and no rosy lamp, and no supper, and no princess. She choked on a little sob as she pushed open the attic door, and broke into a low cry. The fire was blazing, supper was waiting, and Ram Dass was standing smiling. He salaamed.
Mrs. Sarah remembered. She told Sab all. She wished you to know her good fortune which has befallen her. She did not wish you to go to sleep unhappy. The Sab commands you go to him tomorrow. You are to be attendant to Missy Sab. Later I take these things back over the roof.
There were never such friends as Sarah and the Indian gentleman. Somehow they suited each other in a wonderful way. Within a month he was a new man. He even began to enjoy his wealth, and his greatest pleasure was inventing things to surprise her. But there was nothing that Mr. Carrisford loved more than the recollection of the little princess in tatters, and how he and Ram Dass had planned the visits to the attic. One evening, when they were sitting together in front of the warm, blazing fire, Sarah told him the story of the baker's shop and the 4-pence piece she had found in the mud. When she had finished, she asked if she could do something special. Of course, the Indian gentleman said she could. The next morning, to Miss Minchin's irritation, she saw a magnificent carriage draw up next door, and the Indian gentleman and a little figure warm with soft furs descend the steps to get into it, followed by a sight which irritated her even more. It was Becky, a happy, rosy-faced attendant, carrying her mistress's wraps and belongings and accompanying her in the carriage. A little later, the carriage drew up before the door of the baker's shop, and its occupants got out and entered. The good-natured woman's face lit up when she saw Sarah.
I remember you, miss.
Yes, you once gave me 6 buns for 4pence
And you gave 5 of them to a beggar child. I've always remembered it. There's not many young people that notices a hungry face in that way. Excuse me for taking the liberty, miss, but you look rosier and, well, better than you did.
I am better, thank you. And I've come back to ask you to do something for me.
Oh, bless you, miss. What can I do?
When you see any hungry children around the shop, particularly on those dreadful days, and they sit on the steps or gaze in the windows, would you give them something to eat and send the bills to me?
Oh, bless me. It'll be a pleasure, miss. Indeed, I do give away bits of bread I can afford since that day. I always remember how you gave those buns away, as if you was a princess.
She looks so hungry, even hungrier than I was. Have you ever seen her since then? Do you know where she is?
Yes, I do. She's in my back room. She's been here a month helping me in the shop, and a decent, well-meaning girl she's turned out to be. You see, I told her to come when she was hungry, and she did. And I gave her some odd jobs to do. Now I've given her a place and a home, and she's as thankful as a girl can be. Her name's Anne. She has no other.
Then a neatly clothed girl came from the little back parlour. She looked shy, but her nice face was no longer savage, and the wild look had gone from her eyes. Sara and she recognised each other immediately. They stood looking at each other.
Anne, I have just thought of something. Perhaps Mrs. Brown will let you be the one to give the buns and bread to the children. Perhaps you would like to do it, because you know what it is to be hungry.
Then Sara took her hand out of her muff and held it out, and Anne took it, and they looked straight into each other's eyes. Anne gently nodded her head, and Sara knew that they understood each other. Then Anne stood quietly watching as Sara left the shop, got into the carriage, and drove away with the Indian gentleman.
If you've enjoyed this story, be sure to listen to other titles in the series, including The Secret Garden, The Railway Children, and Anne of Green Gables.